What's going on, everybody? Welcome to another installment of the Facts Projects. And today I have an extremely special guest, my main man, Jason Primrose, straight out of Cali. I know it's the sun's still going, is still glaring over there. It's dark as hell over here on the East Coast. So, the author and creator of The Lost Children of Andromeda and the book Zosma. Thank you, sir, for being here.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited.
Absolutely. This is a long time coming, by the way. You
Yeah,
know
yeah,
what I'm saying?
absolutely.
Because we've interjected in talks periodically, and we pretty much. I think I wanted to make sure that it was the right moment in the right medium at the right time, and this is definitely what it needed to be.
Yeah.
So the main thing that I wanted to talk about was in the definition of black sci-fi and its notoriety, its non-monolith thought process on the outlook of a world that necessarily isn't treated in the fashion of popularity as it should, even though it's as popular as it is, because it allows people to see forethought of what the world and the universe can be.
Mm,
You know,
yeah.
so so if you can, how did the construction in your mind on this project begin?
I just want to show you this, and I know I bring it out a lot,
Yeah.
but this book
Okay.
from when I was 10, which I posted about a while ago, I remember when I discovered this story, I was like, oh man, this is so cool. But like, I always wanted to see, you know, black superheroes.
Yeah.
I think what I knew of, even at this age, I didn't even think I discovered X-Men yet. I was still reading books like Chronicles of Narnia,
Yeah.
A Wind in the Door, A Wrinkle in Time, stuff like that. So
Mm-hmm.
um, when I came back to this project, um, there was this little boy in me that had this story, you know, connected to him, and I basically it couldn't look any other way, right? Like it needed to be, you know, Alistair. Um, and because when I looked around, I didn't see enough people, and I started in like 2016, I think was the first time.
Yeah.
So I I didn't see much. I didn't see much, and it's grown over the last few years. But I mean, I looked out on the landscape. I was like, we're missing, you know.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Now, as far as like where the characters derive from, how the story pretty much took footing, where do you say that came from?
yeah, I mean, I was heavily inspired by fiction literature, sci-fi, a lot of fantasy.
Mm-hmm.
I don't actually didn't read too many dystopian novels growing up, but I kind of started to blend. I mean, this is like a blend of fantasy, dystopian, and sci-fi
Uh-huh.
together. Um, and then I got really into like cartoons and films like that. So, you know, I've always been a Marvel head, and f- fusing like what I see in the world with the kind of imaginative tropes of these different genres,
Mm-hmm.
and like seeing how I can like mix them all up to go together. That's been the fun of this piece. So I'm always inspired by what I read. I'm inspired by how people behave inside of like systems and situations.
Right.
um, you know, the power that we have as individuals, as people, and then the powers we could have, you know, if we could have telepathy or manipulate the elements and things like that. So blending all of that, um, yeah, I don't know. I'm inspired by people. I'm inspired by what I don't know or understand and what I can't see,
Mm-hmm.
um, and just saying, let's make it up. Like, let's throw it in here and see how it can work.
Right. Now, the main character, Alistair,
Yeah,
is there anybody either in real life or in the fictional world that person derives from?
man, Alistair's me, man.
He's
I mean, I feel like I'm on a mission to turn into him. I got the hair.
uh-huh.
You know, I've been doing the cosplay shoots, but um part of the difficulty in writing Alistair at the beginning was that he is me.
Okay.
And to go through that journey with myself of, hey, I'm on a journey to, own my inner power, to influence minds, to, change the world, and knowing that he's on that same journey. And all the while I'm believing that there are other people that are doing it better, bigger, faster, stronger. They have more power than I do. And so I spent a lot of time in my writing kind of like hiding Alistair in the text and like hiding what he's capable of and all that stuff.
Right.
And so in what's coming out in 2050Z, it's like ownership, like all Alistair all the time, just like, oh my goodness. But you really start to understand and see the path. There's dynamics in there with my parents, like my mother and father, how my relationship with them is very different. That's built in there. Some of my relationships in terms of like, I think how I've worked in systems and in places, like I explained, and then the people that I saw reflecting back and how friends and family members have operated in those spaces too. Um, so it's very much like Alistair's journey is very much my own, just blown way out of proportion, just like completely fantastic. But it's also all the little, Black boys that grow up and, think they're supposed to be one way, and not another, or think that they can't be powerful, or think that they need to dim their light so they can move through the world. That's like where it all came from, and that's something that I struggled with and experienced a lot. So it's an important, even the new cover, Alistair's like on the cover,
Right.
I see him like moving into this space where he's taking on the world. It looks like he's facing the world that's about to end. And I just think that as a in literature, as a as a as an experience, I think is just so important.
It's true. It's true. Now, were you more so geared towards sci-fi? I know you said that like basically like the comic side pretty much caught on at a later end. Is there any particular, I guess, any particular show or cartoon or anything that stands out? Because when you talk about the Marvel universe within comics, the first thing I see when I see Zosma is the cosmic universe that Marvel built, which I always saw as vast and never ending, infinite, no pun intended, because infinite is always the word in Marvel. You know what I'm saying? So like, but the characters have this perception of somewhat beyond humanity, and it carries on in how they speak to each other. Within the dialogue, I think they found the ways to create dialogue within some of the characters in the cosmic realm as opposed to some that they have on Earth. They talk. The conversation is totally different.
Yeah.
So I've noticed because you sent me bits and pieces of the audiobook, and the speech that was given throughout that piece resonated as to the way that I would expect people within a cosmic perspective to speak. So I found that fascinating. And for this book to be put out, and it was put out originally, 2 years ago, if I'm correct?
Zosma was put out in 2018. Yeah.
2018. So like, from that thought process of when it was published, I'm trying to like recreate how like the story just came to be. And when you sent me that audio, it was like, okay, now I see it.
Yeah, well, that's the challenge of creating. It's music. You could be a director, you could be a screenwriter, like anything, right?
Yeah.
So Zosma was an exploration of my world, right? I basically wrote through it, which I think is the best way you could craft characters and storylines. Anyway, you might as well just get dirty with it, right? Get messy. So when I went back to write 2050Z, which is a prequel, and where I was in my life, like the world just opened up for me. So the lore, the language, It
Mm-hmm.
became so deep and so real and almost different that I wrote 2050 in another way, which you can hear
Yeah.
in the audio, right? And so um it became this experience, like this kind of like expansive experience. And even for me writing it was that as well, because just again where my head was,
Mm.
I was very open. Like my mind was just like
Oh,
wherever it needed to be,
I can,
wherever it needed to be.
can imagine, because it's the detail. There's a difference. I always think when you're writing from the perspective of humanity, and there's a
Yeah.
difference between sci-fi writers and people with that write within epic fantasy. You know,
Mhm.
like sort of that lore of like Lord of the Rings or Game of Thrones or anything like that. But with sci-fi, you have to put the details out there because it is as vast as it is. You know, like I was talking to another good brother, Jeffrey Johnson, who wrote Ennead, which
Oh yeah,
I think I have here. So I was talking to him,
love them.
and not only, you know, you not only are you like how you basically constructed this, you're not talking from the perspective of the story and the characters that are in there. You're talking from the plot point of the background and the galaxies and the universe that are surrounding it. You're talking about observing other planets, fictional planets that are basically put out there, and the people and the alien races that basically construct those planets, and the personalities of those characters that live on those planets, whether in harboring the fact of whether they're protagonist, antagonist, they speak a languages. This is the stuff that like sucks me in. Okay,
Yeah.
you know what I'm saying. This is the type of stuff that sucks me in, because being fascinated by, you know, Star Trek, Star Wars, but beyond that, like Buck Rogers, Battlestar Galactica, and everything like that. When you take the the conglomerate of people, not just the melting pot of black, white, brown, but then you have alien races that are basically being brought up, and refugee tribes on this certain planet, and you know, you have monarchies and government and factions and everything like that, and it all gets just thrown into this one big book, and it just turns out to be beautiful in the end. It's so many parts.
Yes, there are so many parts. I it's funny because I remember when I sent my first my first manuscript to an editor, and it was like 250,000 words or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Everything after 100,000 words has to go. She's like, the book's too big. You have like 3 books in this book, and I had brought in the aliens and all that other stuff, and and I like to tell this because I know people like dragons, but the universe gets so big, and it's really all in here still. The
Mm-hmm.
universe gets so big. There are all kinds of like creatures and things from these different planets that all like come together. And I've already seen it happen. And so now it's just like getting it out of my fingers, which is going to take me probably at least a decade. But I'm like here for it. I'm here for it. It's fun.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing that a lot of people don't necessarily understand with the the books that you create, is that it's never ending. You
Yeah.
know, you have 2050Z as a prequel. I'm pretty sure that sequels are already pretty much in written form for Zosma as well.
Yeah.
So like so it's like this story and saga could go on because there's so many characters put into place. There's so many races of different people that are basically brought, and they have their own backstories. They have their own origins, and it's all connected.
Yes, yes. Yeah. And I really so, you know, I looked at the whole timeline, right? And I picked a moment to
Mm-hmm.
start. And I said, oh, let's start with the arrival. It's a bridge moment between the two like storylines, right? This storyline of the other galaxy
Mm-hmm.
and how things are the direction of Earth's trajectory is transformed, right? Or
Mm-hmm.
humanity's trajectory is transformed. So the arrival is this pivotal moment in the middle. Um, that we get to experience firsthand through Alistair's perspective.
Mhm.
And he's only 7 years old, so he's kind of like observing the sky, doing these weird things, and his dad acting out of character,
Right.
and he doesn't even really know what they're running from. He just knows that they're speeding away. Um, but that to me was always necessary. Like
Mhm.
it always needed to be that moment. I've written that moment. Oh, I can't tell you how many times I've written that scene,
Right.
so many times, because it's always been the moment that brings the aliens and then changes the trajectory of human salvation. Um, and I thought, why not put it in audio form? Why not put sound design behind it? Like, why
Mhm.
not make it something accessible in a world where we're not going to bookstores, and I have something right now,
Yeah.
that I can share, that I can give people to like grab onto to enter the world. So um yeah, I mean, it's so fun. I don't think I was having fun for a long time.
Yeah.
But I'm having a lot of fun now.
I'm about to say it seems like you're having fun.
I'm
'Cause
having a lot of fun now. Yeah, this year's been fun.
because let's expand on that. When you send me the audiobook, I get the audiobook and I'm like, I don't think I've ever seen the perspective, maybe only a few times, where the author takes the time to foretell the story in a certain fashion. And
Mhm.
not only that, but you pinpointed it with how it's registered sonically with the music that is placed into it. So like you're talking, and necessarily because of what's happening, in the background, you're put into place. There's a daydream happening. So you have the ability to just like, sink in and
Mhm.
let it all register. And that's what's like brilliant about this. You're speaking to it from Alice's point of view, and then you have this cosmic like orchestra playing in the background, which is brilliant.
Thank you, thank you.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
kind
absolutely, man. Because like you don't see that much. Because it's a lot of people are passionate about their projects, and they'll speak to it with vigor and conviction, and that's all well and good. But when you're taking it to the point where, you know what, let me explore another type of medium
mm,
where I can connect to the audience without them basically taking the words into their head and registering them into their with their own voice of how they're going to read it. And so you then just put it plainly, let me just build you a soundtrack, you know, pop this in and just move with me. There's a whole vibration here that I feel like you guys should just definitely carry. And this is how the book is laid out. And for that to happen, and I've always found that fascinating with like Star Wars and John L. Williams,
mhm.
uh, like whoever Gene Roddenberry used for Star Trek composition, I always thought was cool as hell. Like this brother definitely had like a couple packs of cigarettes in the alley, and then went back inside, and it was like, all right, come on, let's get this orchestra going and get busy. He just drumming up whatever was going to happen in that episode. Who's Captain Kirk seeing today? Oh, just some green aliens. All right, I got some green alien music. All right, you know what I'm saying?
Right, right, right.
Like whatever was happening, that brother, whoever was doing the composition, and that's important. It's important, I think, in sci-fi. I think it's just as important in sci-fi as the soundtrack, and it's very underrated within horror. Horror has a certain type of soundtrack. The type of music that you're going to hear. There's certain types of instruments that you're going to hear in a horror movie that you're not going to hear in drama or anything like that. So sci-fi, there's a certain sound, and you built it. You know what I'm saying?
Thank you. I was gonna say, speaking of, I was thinking of the Lovecraft Country soundtrack,
Yeah,
like that. I was
yeah.
that show. Like, I can't. I did not. I mean, I just couldn't. you can't know what's going to happen next, and the music gives you that same like level of angst. But
Hmm.
thank you. The composer is very into the story,
Hmm.
like super into the story, created different sounds for each character that he weaves um throughout the song. So, like with this, I wanted to feel cosmic, but also have like a cultural feeling to it. So
Right.
you'll definitely hear that in the later compositions that come in the later chapters. But it was like when I heard that, when I heard the soundtrack, I was like,
Hmm.
this is it. Like, this is the thing. This is the sound. It's ours. Like, it doesn't belong to anybody else. I've not heard it other places.
Right.
And it was really important to have. I mean, for me, it's all about IP, right?
Yeah.
I have IP across, three or four different mediums. And I think sometimes we wait for people to give us permission to create the things that we want to create. And that can leave people feeling like unfulfilled or like it's not possible. And what I think is really inspirational about like indie comic creators and things like that is that you get a bunch of people together. You got an artist that's passionate,
Hmm.
storyteller, you get a writer, producer, editor, like all these people that are like and kind of create like a mind meld of of your own comic universe, and then you go forward. And I think I've always been looking for something like that. And literature tends to be a very solitary experience. You write, you edit. If you don't have a publisher, it's kind of like one for one. You work with different people to like bring things together. So,
Yeah.
um, in ways of creating like long-standing partnerships with people, to because it's not like someone could come in book three and like edit book three and like not know what happens in book one and two. That would be difficult
Yeah.
because they need to understand how we got here. What's the new arc? Are the characters changing? Are things consistent and stuff like that? So yeah, I definitely agree. I think that the precision is something that's really important, and also just forget, just do it. Like, just figure it out. Like, get out and make it happen.
Hmm. Now, I know you referenced this towards me because I remember you messaged me one day about it, and it was the obstacles and hurdles, pretty much uh rings of fire that you pretty much got to jump through in the as an independent literature and book writer,
Mm.
and as far as marketing and promotion, as opposed to uh the indie comic community. Now, can you speak on that?
Sure. Uh, I would say that it's a little bit of a, it feels like a mountain to climb alone.
Hmm.
So, what happens in traditional publishing is like they push you up, you know. People aren't going to hear about you, but the places that people discover books, bookstagrammers and things like that, these now they've got these boxes like, Owl Crate and stuff like that. They've
Yeah.
got these box platforms and these bookstagrammers and the independent bookstores and stuff like that. But there's all these gates up when it comes to independent authors because of, content quality control, which I totally understand. And
Right.
so when you're coming out of the independent space, there have been enough people making independent books that maybe they weren't edited, maybe they were purchased and no one bought them, and so they returned them. And so they started putting up these guardrails of like, how can we make sure that, we don't lose out and we're still promoting literature. So the hurdles that I face is that I'm not represented. I don't have a publisher.
Hmm.
And so everything I do is like one for one. Like, hey, will you carry my book? An independent publisher, if I reach out to them personally, show them, the book, give them an option to like check it out, they might say yes. Not an automatic. There's some platforms that don't support independently published work at all.
Hmm.
Some bookstagrammers will not feature independently published books at all, and a lot of these publishers already have they have years worth of rollout schedule already planned out. They have these people's feeds taken up.
Right.
And then one other thing I heard was that people were hesitant to feature a first book because they
Mm,
weren't sure if you would publish the second one because people just drop off sometimes. So there's
right.
some stores that won't carry a series if they don't think the series is going to be continued.
Hmm.
They won't promote a book if they don't think people are going to finish the series that they're started talking about.
Right.
Um, and then the last thing is just picking up a book and reading it and not knowing who it came from. And that I don't think that that happens very often without I mean, like any product, with there needs to be recommendations and endorsements and people like vouching for it in some way.
Hmm.
Um, and so I think that one of the ways that I've overcome that is just because of people like yourself and the indie comic community sharing the artwork and sharing the stories. And Concrete, amazing. I love Lonzo. He's like my brother. And he rolled Zosma into into one of the rewards. So then
Mm,
all these people get like this big world, two big worlds to jump into. So it's things like that that help reduce the friction.
right.
And I'm so blessed to have that on the comic side because it doesn't happen on the literature side. We are
Right.
all kind of out here trying to figure it out.
Oh,
Ourselves.
most definitely. Most
Yeah.
definitely. And let's expand on that because how has the reception you've gotten? 2020 is a whole different animal, especially within the pandemic and everything like that. But what has taken footing is that uh, a resurgence of community started to happen. Definitely within the independent comic book community, definitely within the independent Black comic book community.
Mm.
And we have taken ourselves into the equation as fans in order to, big up a lot of people. Like I think I started doing the IG lives around May,
Mm-hmm.
and they got a good reception. And then I didn't realize I don't think I realized what I was doing, but to see, pretty much everybody like grabbing on to another. I think I remember talking to Wilson Lee from CNS Comics,
Mm-hmm.
who wrote to Lasha,
Mm-hmm.
and I said, "Hey, I think you need to talk to Jason because y'all speak the same damn language." So
He
like,
did message me after that. We've been
yeah,
talking.
I'm sure he messaged you that because like when I read to Lasha and I was speaking to, I was also speaking to you through message and everything like that. I was like, y'all, I swear, y'all seem like y'all are speaking the exact same wavelength. Basically, he created a sci-fi comic book called Talasha of the Stars, and it
Oh, I
revolved.
pledged it. Where's
Yeah,
my
yeah, I know you have it. I saw
where's
the
my, where my poster?
messages
Yeah,
earlier.
exactly.
But he created this being of Talasha, a beautiful Black entity, a cosmic entity who basically is a wanderer throughout the universe in like episode 0 and then going into episode 1. And I was like, this I was like, wait, I was like, hold on, this is cool as shit. Because the thing is, it's not a monolith. It shows that we're not one dimensional.
Yeah, yeah.
We're not necessarily one dimensional. Um, with you creating something within sci-fi, with people that are creating fantasy comics, it's not just digging into the superhero realm. We've done that over and over and over again. Power to them because this is the thing; it has to get put out there, and there's a lot of them that are very different from one another. But when you start to dig into other genres, whether you're going into Lovecraftian horror like David Rucker does,
Mhm.
or going into deep, deep galaxy driven sci-fi like you're doing, and jumping into the occult and like Jermel does with Absolver and everything like that, or having a very strong female figure like Onaji has with Odina.
Mhm.
It just shows that there's global level type of categoric, you know, structure in how these stories are being created. And I think that that's the cool thing. 2020 has been cool, very cool, and I'm happy to talk about it as far as like the indie comic community is concerned.
Yeah.
And I'm sure you see it too because like it's ever reaching. Like
I mean, I don't think I could have imagined this year would go how it went. I was looking back over my sales from last year and sales from this year, and I'm not going to say any numbers, but let's just say that like us getting the opportunity to digitally connect, right? And you know, we missed a lot of the cons, but there's places that I may not have ever gotten to where I might have met someone, and because we would always be moving around and doing our jobs, and we wouldn't have had the opportunity to like connect in such depth. And so I think about what a blessing it's been for us to come together as a digital community, because as we can see, like that is what's going to be the driving force forward. I keep telling everybody, I have seen 7 indie comic Kickstarters be funded, at least. Those are just the ones I know about that I've pledged to.
Yeah.
So, and they keep coming. They
Yeah.
keep coming. They keep coming. And so, I mean, Concrete, NAD, right? Is that how you say it?
Yep.
CNS, Decimation Earth, Nani Nani, I think was the name of that one that was like amazing out of London.
Yeah.
Um, Impound Comics, like the list
It's
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 never ending. And then who just launched? And then Godhood,
Godhood.
yeah, and then Godhood just launched today. So uh it's clear there's a hunger.
Mm-hmm.
It's clear that, of course, in Black Sands, I mean they're not doing Kickstarter. They're raising investment funds.
Yeah.
Like they have opened their doors
They're,
to,
they're they're venture
that's the dream.
they're a venture capitalist.
They're a venture capital.
They're like a
They
venture
are a
capital
powerhouse.
indie company. You know
Yeah,
what I'm
they're
saying?
a factor. They're a factory. You
Yeah.
know, like they have their own IP. They're in a position to develop further their own IP through media and take other people's stories and develop them too. So, I mean, and to have that be Black owned and operated, like that's what we want. You know,
Yeah.
that's what we want. Um, so I and look, we're talking about, oh, the you know, I keep hearing these stories like the Black community is disproportionately affected. Like I know it, I hear it. It is true in some cases. I
Mm-hmm.
also see that that story isn't true when we're dedicated to something specific that
Very
we
true.
want.
Yeah.
Because to raise $1 million in the middle of a pandemic, I mean,
Yeah. How?
and right, and then cumulatively, if I look at all of the you know, all of the Kickstarters across, it's like
Yeah.
we're doing we're doing it. And Nani Nani raised like some crazy amount of pounds, like
Yeah.
200,000, something like that. So we have it, you know.
It's amazing.
It's
You know,
amazing.
and the thing is, like, I remember during that whole streak, and it's still happening. Like it was just like back to back to back to back. Like
Yeah,
everybody was getting funded within hours. You know, it's Nana got funded within, like, I think a day. I remember Concrete 7 hours. I
yeah,
think it was like Black Sand doing what they just did with their second round of investments. I invested both times. Um,
same.
you know what I'm saying?
And immediately,
Like yeah.
like
But
no waiting.
but to see what they did both times in the time that they did it, because I think it took 2 weeks, 2 weeks for them to do exactly what they did. And it just goes to show, because we get we get the bad rap, and especially within the Black community. I'm not even going to say that the entire Black community basically funded every single one of those books. There's a lot of different diversity as far as the fans and the money that's being pumped into a lot of these independent collections as they are. But it's important to put out there. We get a bad rap for in the Black community for buying the clothes that we buy, buying the jewelry that we buy, buying things in excess that we buy, buying dumb shit for cars, putting weird ass TVs in with, like we did in the early 2000s, and rims and all this dumb shit. When we actually put it to something constructive that has value, and if it's a storyline, a charity, uh voter registration, or anything like that, nobody realizes the power that's basically constructed by what is going to happen when all the money is in the pot. Every person has their hand in the team ready to go. you know
Yeah,
Nobody understands that until it actually happens, and you're like, whoa.
yeah,
Like, not only is this happening on a singular level, it is happening consistently,
yeah,
time and time and time again. So it's inspiring from that point of view, and then you're going to look at it from the perspective of, if I do put my money into this, you know, I want to see a good product first and foremost. But now I feel like I'm a part of the series.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yep.
I think one of the things that's really important, and I love like, um, you know, I'm a big advocate for literature. I read books more than comics.
Yeah.
And after talking to David, talking to Lonzo, like, you know, the struggles that I think we all shared when it came to reading and writing as
Hmm.
we were growing up is something that's pretty widespread. And I just really want to see that same level of enthusiasm for literature,
Hmm.
because literacy and education and like the way we use our words
Hmm.
is the power that we have as people, as individuals.
Yeah.
And so the better that we can, you know, have mastery over not only that, but also what it is that's going out there, I think will be really impactful. So to see more independent authors, you know, of a certain quality, to see more people publishing books, um, you know, long form novels and things like that. And in this way, right? I think about like Children of Blood and Bone,
Mm.
you know, Marlon James's book, N.K. Jemisin. You know, there's a few people that are publishing this like fantastical literature
Yeah.
that gives imagination and agency, um, and not necessarily, it doesn't really necessarily talk about the past, but kind of what's possible in the realm of the world that we're in today, or the world that doesn't exist or can't be seen, or the future.
Hmm.
Um, and being able to dive into that space and then foster more creation from that space, because I could probably count the number of people writing in that genre right now, and most of them are being like like I commented on the talk you had the other day, where we're talking about the picking game,
Yeah.
right? So when I'm publishing books, oh, I want a black creator. I'm looking for black manuscripts with you know, marginalized voices, whatever. Well, then they pick one, maybe two, maybe three,
Hmm.
and then they publish those and like, oh, we have diversity now in our roster. Well, what about all the other hundreds and kids
Right.
who wanted to write a book? Or so the pipeline, right, is very small
Yeah.
for literature. It's kind of like basketball or anything else. You got the pipeline being really small. So how can we get people to create outside of that, so that
Hmm.
we still get our words, our stories out there,
Right.
and um, you know, and also encourage more people to do the same thing.
Yeah, because it seems like it's like a quota game, and that's what makes it angrily not fun. You know, it's like,
Yeah.
you know, because it seems like every company has a quota of how many diversity books that they're going to publish, and then once they reach that quota, it's like all stops. There's a wall.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah,
full stop. Hit the button. No more. No,
yeah.
thank you. You know, but
And to be fair, the other thing is people actually stepping in the ring, right?
yeah,
So it's actually someone believing that they should pitch to a publisher. So how many kids are being groomed, right, in the skill of writing, that are reading, that are wanting to be authors, that are people of color, LGBTQ plus, like things like that, that are then submitting, so that we're in a certain ratio, level of ratio, in comparison to all the people that are submitting in the first place.
this is true.
What we know historically, right, is like a lot of white guys, straight white guys writing fiction, especially in this genre.
Hmm.
And now we've got an influx of women, which became a counter to, you know, the number of like white men dominating the genre. But then those women were all white for the most part.
Yeah,
So now we're starting to see like other ethnicities and nationalities and stuff come into play. But it's still going to be a volume play, right? It's like how many people are submitting their manuscripts, doing their pitch letters,
it's true.
you know, getting into the pipeline in the first place.
I think one of the like most I guess prolific authors out there that has the ability to jump from the literary world to the comic world is Ta-Nehisi Coates.
Oh,
So doing the Water Dancer,
Mhm.
and also taking the time to jump into Marvel and do Black Panther, do Captain America, like he's done, and he's done an excellent job with everything. You
Yeah.
know that he just had his film narrated on HBO Max, Between the World and Me, which I thought was magnificent. But he's like one of those people that has the ability to do that. You know, not only can I create a world for you
Hmm.
through literature and be judged on a not even on a microscopic level. This man's like through the biggest lens you can find, telescopic. You know,
Yeah.
but to then take a person that does literature as long as he's had, and then jump into comics, shorten the length of what he has. But the thing is, he's always had a love for comics, so it's like, how would I perceive this character
Yeah.
if I jumped into this body? How would I make him speak? And I think he definitely proved his point by how he constructed some of the best Black Panther and Captain America novels that well, not novels, graphic novels that came out during that time. But he's always been like somebody top tier on that list. So, but as far as sci-fi is concerned, how do you feel that the genre is taking hold, like recently, throughout the past few years?
Um. Well, I don't know about the past few years,
Hmm.
but very specifically in the last year or so. Well, I'll put it this way: since like about 2018 was when I started being really active on my social channels, and since then I've met a few like sci-fi ish authors.
Yeah,
Like some of us like blend fantasy, um, talking about creating these different worlds, but we're all inspired, right, by some more traditional
yeah,
uh, sci-fi works. And so um, what I've seen is there is a really strong interest in building new sci-fi worlds from the from our lens, from our level of storytelling, where we're the hero or where we're the protagonist, and we have agency in the direction of the future of the world.
yeah.
And I think that's just an important conversation for us to have right now anyway.
Mhm.
um, and then yeah, so I mean that's what I've seen, that's what I felt, that's what I've experienced, even in conversation with these different authors and things like that. A.R. Bingham, Leo Clifton, oh my gosh, Jeremy Williams. I think of anyone else. I talked to Janon Coles, who's putting out a book. So there's a few people that are all we're all working on a series or a set of stories that um, are very sci-fi driven,
Mhm.
and it's just like we can do this too,
Yeah.
with 2050Z. It's I just that book is like if I had if I had a child, it'd be like, this is my favorite baby. um uh in 2050Z, and I think in some of the other stories that I've read and looked at,
Right.
um it's just the depth of this of the science fiction, like the the ways in which, like, I think about like 1984, like in any of those books where
Ah,
Ready Player One, Blade Runner, like those stories where you're like, this is the advancement of culture,
yeah.
to a particular place. And I remember when we were doing the book club, one of the women was like, where are they from? Because they have their own dialect. Like, seems like,
Mhm.
maybe like like Chicago. It feels very nuanced. And so that was like one of the places that I went to when I was crafting the story, was like,
Ah,
what is the what does the fiction look like with the future of this, like, of these types of neighborhoods? Like, how are they speaking?
mhm.
um, what technology do they have access to and don't have access to? I think about like in some of the other stories, like in Janan's story, how far it is in the future, right? We're like not hundreds but thousands of years in the
Right.
future, I'm pretty sure, where we've had a whole complete collapse and rebuilding. So it's just interesting to see all these different perspectives on what humanity could look like as we move closer toward whatever it is that's coming. And so I think that's what we're all channeling, is what, you know, what we're experiencing in real time, like right now, and saying like, this is what it could look like,
Mm-hmm.
and this is how we could shift if people were like this protagonist, or if people made these types of choices.
Right.
And let's be really aware of the villains that look like this. And so, and then putting those people on the page and giving them backstory, giving them humanity, so that you know that they can look like people
Mm-hmm.
and still be villainous, rather than having them be like blanket villains that you can't really get into. So that's what I have been seeing. Um, yeah, that's what I've been seeing.
Well, what do you say to like the ignorant responses that basically people give when it's brought up? It be like when it be like, hey, you into sci-fi, and you be like, oh, you mean Star Wars or Star Trek?
That's so funny. So this is this is probably going to get me canceled forever. But I stopped watching Star Wars after Jar Jar Binks happened.
Phantom
Yeah.
Menace. Okay.
So I stopped watching Star Wars after that. But I know I need to watch Mandalorian, and I know I need to catch up on all of those things.
Mandalorian will change your perspective, sir.
Yeah, and I think the other one, yeah, Rogue One.
Bro,
Rogue One? Yeah,
absolutely.
yeah, yeah, Rogue One. Yeah.
Absolutely. I feel as though, okay, as everybody puts in the perspective that they are the two mainstream talking points when it comes to sci-fi, Star Wars and Star Trek.
Star
You
Wars
know,
stuff. The Star Trek I never got into.
you never got into Star Trek.
My mom is a huge Star Trek fan. My
Your
mom's
mom,
a,
your
it
mom's
was
a Trekkie.
boring to me. Star Trek was I don't know, that
No,
sounds weird.
no. This is the thing. I know it sounds boring to you. You're not the first person I've heard that from. You know
Okay,
what I'm saying?
good, good.
Because I remember we got into on my Party Nerds podcast. We had a discussion about Star Wars versus Star Trek. We have our good friend Devin Wade, who has a very strong personality. You know what I'm saying? And pretty much gave in context saying, I don't fuck with Star Trek because that fake phaser bullshit does not fool me. You know what I'm saying? He was like in Star Wars, as soon as they cut on the barber clippers, boom, as soon as they cut on the barber clippers, you know it's game time. You know?
Yes,
So,
yes, yeah.
but he was
Oh my
like,
god, yeah, the little lasers, and I mean,
it's cool, but I'm saying like the world outside of just Star Wars and Star Trek, it's so much bigger. And the things it seems like every time that there's a very another popular sci-fi maybe movie or book or series that comes out, people gravitate to it and they end up loving it. Firefly, people still argue about the fact that it was canceled. People still talk about Blade Runner
mhm,
as much as it happened. People love Aliens.
yes,
Aliens, Alien 3, Alien Resurrection, all the other ones that basically came out. And the thing is, even though the most money was made between Star Wars and Star Trek, people love those franchises.
yeah, yeah. It's, but I think it's the cult fandom, right? It's the first place you
Yes.
go when you think nerd, or you
Mhm.
think
What
sci-fi,
well, that's
because
the thing.
yeah,
So comic conventions, Comic Cons in general, where they derive from were Star Wars conventions. It was
yeah,
Star Wars conventions that were happening around the United States, and it formed from Star Trek conventions. People started putting booths in there with other little things that were happening with comic books. Then some more things happened. People started putting multimedia and movies in there. You got little sneak peeks here and there.
hmm,
And then people started to dress up. People initially started to dress up as Star Trek characters at those conventions, and that's the invention of cosplay.
oh my, and yeah, I mean, I'm not at all surprised. That just makes so
Yes.
much sense, because what other uh what other intellectual property had that much heart and spirit to it?
Yeah,
And at that time, I mean,
yeah. The barriers that it broke. You
yeah,
know,
yeah,
Captain Kirk being, well, shoot, you might as well put it like this. You might as well say that Captain Kirk is pansexual. You know, as far as the sexual prowess of Captain Kirk, he didn't care about what it was, who it was, what they looked like, black, white, polka dot, purple, pink, green, tail, horns. You was cute. I'm coming for you. That's Captain Kirk. You know what I'm saying?
yes, yes,
So that's and people like looked at Captain Kirk as like just being like this example of machismo, but you know, pretty much in context, you know, he had this thing about him where he just didn't care about who you were. If he liked you, he liked you.
yeah,
And that was explored in the 60s and 70s. You know,
right. Well, and yeah, and on such a widespread,
yes,
medium too. Yeah, yeah,
everybody watched Star Trek back then.
yeah,
There wasn't heavy sci-fi on TV or anything like that. So Captain Kirk hooking up with somebody that was pink wasn't weird to anybody that was looking at it through the lens because they saw female.
yeah, yeah,
But it was
yeah,
like, you know, she has a tail, right? You
yeah.
know, she has horns. Captain Kirk doesn't have a problem with this. You know, this is the cool thing about Captain Kirk. You know, I'm sorry, I went there. I went there. I went there.
Well, but it's interesting that you say that because I definitely in Zosma more so, um the the going down that road of being in love with an alien that doesn't necessarily have all the features that
Yeah,
human does.
yeah.
It's very interesting.
Because you have to look at you're thinking when you're watching it or you're reading it, it's an alien. That there's no feelings attached to it. There's no emotions or anything like that. And all of a sudden you have this character, maybe even your main character in the book, having some sort of emotion for something that necessarily you wouldn't think in your head is real.
hmm Yeah,
But yet it happens.
yeah,
And you follow it and you start to fall in love with the story.
yeah,
And the relationship and the conversation and the friction and the tension and the aura between two beings
yeah,
there's no longer a human thing anymore, you know. So it's just that interspace cosmic connection that's going to happen at some it's how it comes together.
yeah, yeah. I yeah, I love that. That's why I really like yeah, I mean that to me is like kind of the core of it. And I think that's the thing about sci-fi
Hmm.
as a whole, right?
Yeah,
It's about we are all living beings and like how do we come together on that? Um it might be harder when we're from different planets, but
yeah,
um you also see a lot of like um homogenous races in sci-fi, which is something that I'm trying to combat.
yeah,
It's something I became aware of when I was reading about like tropes in sci-fi. So, like for example, like the Eurasianians. I'm not going to tell you
mm.
much about them, but there are various shades, and that causes different struggles within like their civilization. So
So there's like colorism, is that how it's being
it's like yeah, this was like the colorism. I think all aliens don't look the same, just like all people don't look the
yeah,
same. So uh one thing that I think is something that's again been characteristic of like previous sci-fi stories is that a lot of the characters are very similar,
yeah,
so they basically just carbon copies of each other. um they all speak the same language, or and so now it's like, oh well, do these different characters have dialects and class systems, and do they look different ways, and
yeah. They've incorporated that.
incorporated that. Yeah, so I love that too, just the real thoughtfulness of like creating a civilization. I mean, it's very it's very intense.
It's true. I feel the same way because I know how you say you don't like the prequels. I didn't like the prequels because the story of the coming up of Anakin Skywalker, aka Darth Vader, is a slave story,
Mm,
which I didn't necessarily agree with. You
yeah,
know, and the Jedi when they basically took it upon them to kind of mold and raise Anakin, he was taken from his mother, who was also a slave. Like
yeah,
they took a child away from his mom in order to raise. So it made me feel a little weird about the Jedi's. And then there was that whole thing about Slaver's Bay,
mm,
where it was a whole mining planet where they had where the whole civilization was based of a hierarchy between the people that ran the planet and the slaves that basically accompanied it in order to mine a certain type of mineral that had to get out for maybe like kyber crystals for their lightsabers and everything like that. And I was like, damn, they incorporated slavery in Star Wars, man. I ain't really appreciate that shit. I was like and the thing is, like, when you start to necessarily see like the story of Darth Vader and everything, and you realize he became who he was, not only because of the fact that he had this anger inside him. He got stripped from his mom. He got raised by some people that he barely even knew. And when he grew up, he still had that rage inside of him. He gets transformed into somebody that turns out to be the villain.
yeah.
Nobody's ever brought up the fact to him when he got older. Be like, yo, you all right, man? Like nobody did a mental
Somebody asked.
you all right? Like nobody did a mental health check on Anakin or nothing. You know what I'm saying? Like basically
Yeah, yeah.
you still
I'm with you on there on that 100%. I think that narrative is tired to say the least, and the scary, a lot of these films and narratives are very impressionable,
Mhm.
and when you know all that you said and like boil it down to one sentence, uh former slaves or become villains,
Yeah.
and that's pretty much that's the story, right? Former slaves become villains. They need to be taken out. They're going to take over the world. They're going to take over the Federation, whatever the case may be. All that inside of this like fantastical world. And then I was kind of like, and even when you were talking, I was thinking, I was like, former slaves or villains. That sounds so familiar.
Yeah.
Where does that show up? And so, like, and it's like, you know, we're not trying to take over the world. No one's trying to take over the world. You
Mhm.
know, I just want maybe my family back, or
Yeah.
you know, you know, freedom, whatever the case may be. So I think it's interesting. And obviously, I am obsessed with Black Panther.
Mhm.
That narrative showed up for me in um, Killmonger's story too,
Yeah.
and I felt so that came out in 2018.
Mhm.
I felt even more strongly about the fact that Alistair needed to be an African American superhero,
Mhm.
because I think in that story, African Americans were still the villain.
Yeah.
With Killmonger having grown up in the neighborhood that he grew up in and losing his father, which was very obviously a very different lifestyle
Mhm.
uh, than than T'Challa, and then to again have that same rage,
Yeah.
take something so beautiful as Wakanda and weaponize it. And so it just it felt like something that needed to be addressed, but I was like, I see what it's saying. And there's this like very, very intricate beauty of Wakanda and the systems and structures and like how it's built and like what T'Challa represents.
Mhm.
He is the king of kings. He is the hero we all want, need, and aspire to be.
Right.
And I want 1,000 of him
Right.
across every fantasy, sci-fi, across every genre.
Mhm.
And then I'll be like, okay, we're good. But like multiply him over and over and over again, that idea of Wakanda over and over and over again on different planets, in
Right.
different alternate futures, in the present, like however it takes shape.
Yeah.
Um, and then I think we'll be in good shape. I think we'll be in
Yeah,
good.
because in the end of the day, T'Challa's storyline, he's a world builder.
Mhm.
After the death of his father, and pretty much seeing how the treatment of he felt empathy towards Killmonger, even though he understood what Killmonger's mission was. He basically got upset at the tribes, the elders of the tribes, in order to take into the fact that we left a boy out here
Mhm.
who was our family, and let him become this, without checking in on him to make sure that he was possibly okay. Just left him in the dark,
Mhm.
not knowing basically any type of who knows if he had family even out there.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But then it was like at that end story to where we're gonna open up Wakanda to the rest of the world, not necessarily to for trade or the dollars that we're going to pump into Wakanda with basically doing anything with vibranium or anything like that. I want to basically showcase the culture to a wide audience. That's
Yeah.
it. Yeah, it's not. There's nothing more like it. It's just if you guys need help or relief or aid, I'm here for that too. But initially, this is my standpoint.
Yeah, and I love what you said too about his level of accountability with the elders, because I think that is how some people feel, right? They feel
Yeah.
like we're being left out, we're left out to dry, we're being
Mm-hmm.
and so being able to
Yeah.
just pull people back and say, hey, we're all one, we're all together, we're family. Um, and move through it that way. And I think as a community, and we have spiritual work to do in terms of letting go of not letting go of, but like channeling our rage
Yeah.
into specific action and specific desires. And so, um, but yeah, I mean, it's such a beautiful story, and
It is.
yeah, it's such a beautiful story, and I
I hope it continues, especially
yeah,
especially T'Challa's story. I know people initially started to basically jump down people's throats saying, oh, don't do anything with T'Challa. That character should go away or anything like that. I tell people all the time, look, T'Challa was created in the 60s. The
yeah,
the mantle of Black Panther carries on from generation to generation.
yeah.
Even if within the comics it gets passed down to Shuri or anything like that, T'Challa has been a landmark character in any type of medium, not only comics, for close to 60 years. So I don't think that that's a character you can just take away because Chadwick Boseman, very unfortunate what happened to him, and to look at the character of T'Challa, which is this all-inspiring landmark character, that's not a character that you just push to the side.
Absolutely not. And I think, it's funny. My mom was talking about John Lewis
Yeah.
after he passed, um, and we can be so precious about our heroes,
Mm-hmm.
and we let people take the brunt. I mean, I'm definitely guilty of it.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, oh, he's got it. Okay, cool. I'm gonna sit right here.
Right.
And so we have characters like John Lewis, like Chadwick Boseman, carrying the legacy.
Yeah.
It's really heavy. And so, like, we don't just like, oh, they're gone. Like, we need another Maya Angelou. We need another Whitney Houston.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? People aspiring to these places, but also multiplying them across where people have agency and they feel powerful enough to be this, so that you have that impact like magnified. And so
Mhm.
I think about um, the worst thing that could happen would be to not have a Black Panther 2 in a world that needs a Black Panther 2 on screen, breaking records, showing people that Black sci-fi, which is what that
Yeah.
essentially is,
It is.
um, and Black comic, like, it's needed, it's wanted, people are after it, they want to see it, everybody wants to see it, not
Yep.
just the Black community, everybody wants to see it. So he needs to be recast thoughtfully. um, but there are tons of talent, and we already know about the challenge of getting roles in Hollywood. So you're basically, if you were to discontinue that, or or whatever, then you're essentially eliminating like an entire budding cast of incredible talent that has longevity beyond what hasn't even been fully realized. So, I think he needs to be recast thoughtfully. And there are plenty of amazing, amazing actors that will do the like franchise justice and carry the legacy of Black Panther, um, and be someone else that we can look up to as well.
Absolutely. Definitely. Jason, I appreciate you doing this, man. Thank you. Please, if you could tell everybody where they could reach you, where they can get your books, to 2050Z and Zosma, where can we find us?
Thank you, thank you. I this is an amazing, like, invigorating discussion. I have so much respect for you, and I watch your lives, and I leave my little paragraphs in the comments.
Hey, bro.
Yeah. So Zazuma is on sale right now. We're doing. You can get it at lostchildrenofandromeda.com.
Mhm.
You can check out the prologue to 2050Z, the podcast. It is on Spotify, Apple Music, Google Podcasts, and that's just the beginning of the next book, which is 2050Z. And 2050Z will be out in February. Kickstarter drops in January, and I'm running it through February for like limited edition hardcover, full color, um, yeah, all kinds of goodies. It's gonna be epic, and might have a little comic book rolled up in there too. But I'm really excited about diving into that. So it'll be really fun.
That'll be dope, man.
Yeah,
Well,
it'll
Jason,
be
I
dope.
appreciate you doing this, man. Thank you, thank you, thank you again. And we will talk.
Yes, we will. All right, James.
Absolutely. Facts
Thank you.
Project. Yeah.